Morning, everyone. Welcome to our second session of the day, Local Voices from the Field. Before we start, I first want to discuss with you some housekeeping notes, especially for those of you who have just joined us. You can pose your questions during the session via the Q&A function. For technical questions about the platform or program, please reach out to a help desk that we have active here and that can help you with your request. And visit the platform to explore also the various options we have at the platform. So you can look at the program, read the speaker bios, and have a look at the online resource library in which we have collected links and documents for you to review. You can also engage with speakers as well as the participants to the session via the meet and greet space at the platform. And there's also an opportunity for group networking via our networking islands, in which you can meet multiple people in a tropical island setting. When you want to communicate about what is being discussed here, on social media, you're encouraged to do so. Please follow or use the hashtag PAX POC 2020 and tag any organizations and speakers to attribute whatever is being said. All sessions will be recorded and videos will also be broadcasted via our website in the days and weeks ahead. My name is Anton Quist. I work for PAX, for the Protection of Civilians team. And I lead a project called the Human Security Survey, in which I want to explain to you what is the benefit of community engagement and why is it important to build in a community engagement component in the work that we do in the field. So why is it important to shed more light on voices from the field and to invest time and effort to get those voices from the field into our programming? Well, in the day-to-day work that we do with the communities, but also with members of peace missions, diplomats, and military, I have encountered what I could call a gap between let's say the spheres of operation of, let's say, the mission and the communities themselves. There's often quite some misunderstanding happening between these groups. And that was also exemplified during one of the sessions that we organized in Central Equatoria State, in which we had a session to bring back the data that we have collected with local government officials, chiefs and other civil society representatives, and there were also Unmiss staff present. And during that discussion, well, you could see how a small excerpt of the discussion that followed, and that exemplified that there's still a considerable gap and misunderstanding sometimes between the experiences of communities themselves in the field and their first-hand accounts of that, and let's say the more formal approach to protection of civilians employed by peace missions that has more to do with conceptual frameworks. And these perspectives do not always understand each other well. So that was the first component that we've already discussed, the gap between local community security needs and the capacities for protection that missions can provide. At the same time, we also have to realize that we may expect that changes to the security situation for local communities are more sustainable if they can be reached after direct implementation or when they are initiated by the communities themselves. And when these security changes are coming under pressure, they are likely to be defended and better maintained by communities themselves if they feel that they have contributed to them as communities themselves. What is also important to realize is that when we talk about community engagement, it's important to distinguish between instrumentalizing civilian participation on the request of a donor or an NGO, and at the same time, what difference it makes if communities can actually bring their direct experiences forward unimpeded and also have a direct stake in the decision making in what that leads to in further programming. So it is quite challenging to structurally build in community engagement in your project. And we have endeavored or attempted to do so in our human security survey in South Sudan. So I would like to show you a video where our local staff and stakeholders try to introduce the human security survey in South Sudan in their own words via a training that we have organized last month.
My name is John Malith Mabor. I work with PAX as Senior Project Officer in a project known as Human Security Survey. I came to Europe to train enumerators on skills and knowledge, how they would be able to do the interviews among the communities. This is not the first training. This is actually the third training. We did several trainings before. In 2017, we had one training, and then in 2018, we had the second training. And now we have the third training. We expect the enumerators to collect data in a duration of 3 weeks. And this data will be sent to Netherlands for analysis. After it has been analyzed, it will be brought back for validation.
My name is Monica Jok Mading, a trained enumerator in Yerul, South Sudan by PAC on Human Security Survey. Our main task is to collect data about human security that will later on be used by the government, community leaders, and other partners to address security issues. What I personally found interested in the questionnaires are the questions asking about gender-based violence. I really thank PAC for coming out with this training because gender-based violence is a real threat and our people don't know how to report such cases.
My name is Abraham Magog. What I have learned from this training is very important because it has highlighted so many issues which are affecting our communities in Greater Yerul. And I think if these issues are later on addressed by our leaders, then our countries will be peaceful.
I'm Mama Deborah. In 2017, the data was collected. The collection of data in 2017 is bringing the dialogue between Denga and Nuer. Those of Amompeng, Panyajier, Maper, Yerul. We made a dialogue in Nyang. In that time, I was a part of that dialogue. In that time, I worked with Ama as a social worker.
I'm by the name Simon Mabor. I was as a former Minister of Local Government and Law Enforcement Agencies for the defunct Eastern Lake State. Yeah, we are very pleased to have a PAX agency that is committed to carry out the training on human security survey for the last 3 years. We really appreciated their efforts and their contribution to get the data from our community in their different localities across the counties of the defunct Eastern Lake State. It is good. We cooperated with them when they have been conducting the training of enumerators, deploying them in different counties to get the data, how the community are going through their living under the conditions of insecurity among themselves and with their neighbors. We really felt the positive impact of their operations. Our communities have been reporting cases of cattle theft, armed robbery, and few instances of gender-based violence.
My name is Barnaba Mayardeng. I'm Secretary General for former Eastern Lake State. The collection of data that is conducted by PAX for community security survey is very important in Yorul and all counties of Yorul, Yorul East, Yorul West, and Awarial. The data exactly really it helped us as a government. It was carried out in 2017, 2019, and the data we received at least show us the fears of the citizen here, which FACTS and AMA, they are partners, and they call for dialogue between two communities, citizen of Pinijar and Yorul East, and that dialogue was held in Yorul East, in Nyang particularly, so that the people have peace of these two communities.
I would like to thank our local colleagues and stakeholders for making this exquisite video. Just to very briefly introduce you to the Human Security Survey, what are our the main purpose of this project is, first of all, to collect information from the civilians to increase our own knowledge about what is going on and what are what is the perspective of local communities regarding their local security. Then it is also important that we use the data that we collect also for general use, so that we are presenting back the data that we collect from the communities, not as a form of courtesy, but also as a very important programming element, so that the discussions that take place resulting from the data will also inform us in, okay, what should we do in a particular area? What are the areas that we need to focus on? So that the communities themselves have a very important voice in how the project should continue in this particular area. And thirdly, it is also important that we conduct or that we use this evidence in our advocacy towards international peacekeeping or peace-building actors, such as Unmiss mission, for instance, in South Sudan, but also diplomats, ministries, and military more broadly. We have three phases in which we try to organize the project, but also try to deploy community engagement. Firstly is the data collection phase, in which we recruit the data collectors, we train them, and we send them in the field with phones to collect the data in the field. After careful analysis, we move into the community engagement phase, in which we bring back the data to the communities, present the data in great detail, and also use that as a basis for discussion, for dialogue between various groups in society. So these could be local government officials, chiefs, they could be members of security providers, but also civil society, and also to collect all the different perspectives that are even within communities about the security situation. And then thirdly, we try to use the data that we have collected and the publications also in our advocacy towards the international actors such as Unmiss and diplomats, embassies and ministries, to inform them about what is going on according to the civilians in their communities, so that we're not just talking about civilians, but also can start a conversation with the civilian communities. This is an example of the data that we collect. We collect it in various forms, in infographics, in written reports, and also through dashboards. And of course, these can always be accessed through our website. Most importantly is that the type of data that we collect revolves around types of incidents that people experience, the perceived perpetrators of these incidents, but also, for instance, what security providers are present and accessible in the areas where they live, and how do people rate the performance of these security providers. This and also other data forms the backbone and the basis of the discussions and the community dialogues that we organize with them, and is also the basis for our local planning of what should be done by whom. These are some quick facts and figures. Currently, we are collecting data in 4 locations across South Sudan. A 5th is to be added next year. And data is just coming in around the clock. So we even very recently did another set of surveys. So we have already collected well over 5,000 surveys by now. We have local committees that also work on the local action plans that the communities set up for themselves. So based on the local dialogues, communities set up an action plan on the priorities that they want to work on, and the local committees that we set up are then tasked to organize follow-up activities, spread awareness, based on the action plan that the communities themselves have set for themselves. Maybe also a funny note is that you can see that we have a consistent female overrepresentation of surveys. I think that's also quite special because there are many NGOs and projects that struggle to collect the views of women broadly, especially in rural areas. But I think that the way we have collected surveys make it very easy for us to collect also the views of women in big numbers and include them also in the decision making. Local peace dividends is actually the marked improvements that people can see or feel in local security situation or in their own perception of the security situation. In the video, it was already alluded to that we contributed to a local peace agreement between neighboring communities in the Lakes and Unity area. We have surveyed both areas separately, and it came from the data and the discussions that they were pointing towards the other community as being the main perpetrator of the insecurity that they've experienced. And after a further set of dialogues, we came to a list of grievances that we were then, with some shuttle diplomacy, were able to really turn into a local peace process that was really carried actually and initiated by the chiefs you can see on the picture. So these were community representatives, the chiefs, who were actually the basis of this peace and of the peace resolutions that were drawn up during 2 consecutive peace meetings. And initially, it was not even the local government who was supportive of this. It came from the communities themselves, and seeing the success of it, the local government also soon embraced it. Another example is in central Equatoria state, where in some areas there is huge tension between farmers and pastoralists. Pastoralists encroaching on farmers' lands, leading to threats of violence. And also thanks to logistical support from the Civil Affairs Unmiss branch of Central Equatoria, we were able to organize a 2-day farmers pastoralist forum in which the representatives from these groups could come up with their own solutions, for instance, including alternative migration routes, so that cattle would no longer encroach on farmers' lands. And for instance, to look for common market opportunities so that both the pastoralists and the farmers could benefit from their respective activities. So to finish in style, I also asked our local contributors and colleagues in the field to reflect on what community engagement means to them, why is it important in their work, and how does it help their own work in getting the perspectives across from the communities in which we work. And I've asked them these 3 questions to reflect on. And I've asked our colleague John Malith Mabor and our local contact person in Jonglei, Bul Kunjok to reflect on these questions.
Hi everybody, my name is John Malith Mabor. I work for PAX as Senior Project Officer, and in my work I deal with community engagement. And with the community engagement, I realized that this is a very good approach because it has advantages. There are 2 very important advantages of community engagement. That is ownership and decision making. Of course, there are also challenges connected to our community engagement. And these challenges include logistical challenges and political challenges. Some of the logistical challenges include bad roads, flooding, and other natural disasters. And political challenges include the conflict. For example, sometime back in 2018, we were planning to bring 2 different communities together. The communities of Panjajar of Unity State, who were Nuer actually, and then communities of Yirul, who were Dinkas. And because of the conflict, it was between the Dinkas and the Nuer. More especially, that's how it has been perceived. So our community engagement did not go through successfully because of the warring communities, and also because of the leaders. Riek Machar comes from the Nuer, and Salva Kiir comes from the Dinka. This fact could not allow us, the NGOs, to bring the 2 communities together because they were fighting among themselves, and the government did not give permissions to bring the 2 communities together. That was a challenge. On top of that, there are spoilers. There are a group of people with arms. They sometimes interfere with our engagement process. So I would say the community engagement approach is very important because it is a people-centered approach. And when we talk of community engagement or protection of civilians, we cannot do it from top down. We have to do it from bottom up, such that we involve the local people to be the partners of any decision making affecting their own securities. So there are also security challenges that have been prioritized by our partners, by the location that we operated. For example, in Jonglei, security issues that have been presented by the community are more or less the same with issues presented by communities in lakes, for example. And also issues presented by people in Panjajar, Unity, are the same. The same issues are presented in Central Equatoria, Juba. The only slight difference is that in Jonglei, there are frequent cases of child abduction and kidnapping, plus cattle raiding because of their neighbors. Although cattle raiding is a big issue across locations in South Sudan, most people are cattle keepers, and they carry guns. So this has facilitated, this violence. They have been raiding cattle among themselves, and of course, killing just happen because as you do it violently, the one who is trying to protect his cattle will become a victim or will kill the raider. That is why in our data collection or in our community engagement, we give them a chance to prioritize the security challenges that need to be addressed. And of course, they prioritize based on what they are experiencing in their localities. And in the summary, I think most of the things that they prioritize are, of course, cattle raiding, as I said before, child abduction, highway robberies. There are also elements of forced marriages, because girls are being sold at high bride prices, and that actually might have triggered raiding cattle also to come and marry. So all these issues are mixed together and they cause community security. So to conclude, I would simply say this approach is very important. When we really want to do a meaningful community engagement, we have to involve communities themselves in things that are affecting them. Then we facilitate as NGOs, as UN, or as partners. Thank you very much.
First of all, I'm privileged and honored to take part in the forthcoming conference organized by PAX. In fact, POC conference organized by PAX. My name is Bul Kunjok. To answer the questions of the importance of why we are doing community engagement is that we try to bring the communities together to let them understand their issues, their own problems that they are facing, and how they will be able to address them. It is important in the sense that we try to create link. We try to create very strong relationship between ourselves and the communities. And the other important of why we are doing community engagement is to ensure that the community feel valued. They feel honored that they are recognized and they are part of the project implementation. By doing so, the communities will be able to enhance their skills. They will be able to have an ability to do their own things. This is why we are doing the community engagement. The other thing that we are doing the community engagement is to make sure the communities organize themselves and try to understand that they are not alone. They are with people, they are with the institutions, with organizations, and with the government. And so they don't feel bad, they don't feel lonely. They feel they are part and parcel of the public's life. That's why it is important to do the community engagement. The other question that I would like to also answer is the questions of the challenges that we are facing in South Sudan when we are implementing our activities, our projects, or when we are doing community engagement. One of the challenges is that, of course, in our case here, we do have what's so-called COMSCOM, Community Security Follow-up Committee. This is the community forms among the community participants who actually attend our dialogues. We get the committee themselves select this committee, and of course this committee is always tasked to do the implementations of the priorities set by the committee during the dialogues. So the finance becomes an issue, the funds to actually fund the activities of the committee becomes difficult, and so they always unable to do their activities on time, and sometimes they fail to do so because there's no money. The other challenge that we have in South Sudan here is the questions of insecurity, because you find everywhere people are fighting. At times you may plan to have an activity somewhere in a certain county, but because of insecurity you will not be allowed to go. So you will hold yourself because of the insecurity, and that you will not on time implement the project. The other problems or the challenge that we are also facing is the issue of restrictions from the government officials, because sometimes you may ask permission from certain government officials to go and do your activity, But because of bad intention from the government officials, sometimes they may deny even an opportunity to go and carry out the activity. So it's one of the challenges that we are also facing. We are also facing a challenge of roads, because we have poor roads, especially when it comes to rain season. The movements of vehicles become difficult. And so it also restricts us to implement our activities on time. That means if it is rainy season, we will not be able to go to do county, for example, or previous counties. And therefore, we put on hold the activity until it becomes dry season. So it shall interfere with our programs. And so these are some of the challenges that we are facing here in South Sudan. The other question that I would also want to answer is the question of the most important priorities that the local authorities and the communities are facing as we speak now in South Sudan. The most priority that we have as we speak now is the question of insecurity, because we find intercommunal violence, cattle raiding, child abductions taking place, and it actually involve killing of people. And so the government, the local authorities, and the communities are trying to sit down and address this issue, but it becomes difficult. This is the issue that being faced by the local authorities and the communities. And it is a priority. And people are trying to come up and to address this issue. It is not only the local intercommunal conflicts. Generally in South Sudan, we have the issue of rebellions and fighting everywhere. And so there is no peace in South Sudan. So the priority is to make sure there is peace. The other priority is the questions of flooding, because as we speak now, people are displaced. The flooding, everywhere is water. So the local authorities and the communities are working hard to make sure the issue of flooding is addressed by putting dikes in place. And so, okay.
Thank you, John and Bul, for providing us with these videos. It's always enlightening to hear our local colleagues speak about the situation in South Sudan itself. Hopefully they will be able to connect with us also during the Q&A session, and they can hopefully respond to some of your questions directly, even though it is quite challenging to connect with them technologically, but that's also how it is to work in South Sudan more generally. It's challenging. Thank you all for this presentation. I would like to welcome you all to pose your questions or maybe even suggestions or examples of a good community engagement in the Q&A section. First of all, I would like to ask you to look at the poll that I think is visible for you all. Which actor is best placed to undertake regular community engagement activities in your context? So in the case of South Sudan, that's already a good question, because there are many actors that are capable and able to do community engagement, but which ones should be the most important ones? But also, of course, in other countries and conflict contexts, this is a recurring question. And I see that NGOs, national NGOs, are being favored at this point by many. And there's a point to make, I think, for many of these actors mentioned here, whether they have the local legitimacy to do community engagement, or the contacts and the credibility locally from communities, but of course having the ability, technical abilities, operational abilities to do so also are very important. So I see that we see a bit of a more mixed picture now, but still the national NGOs or CSOs are being favored by most of our audience. I hope we also have sufficient number of South Sudanese able to connect with us and also participate in the poll. And well, we see with national NGOs or CSOs scoring well over 60%, almost 2/3. And with that, I would also like to turn to the questions that you might have shared with us and open the Q&A session. Again, I hope that Bul and John will also be able to join us remotely by voice or by voice and video, or even if that is not possible, maybe by text of some sort. First question is directed to John and Bul. What was a moment from the last few years that really inspired you or made you feel like this work was making a difference in your community? So I see John is there.
Hi. Good morning. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, John. Did you hear the question?
Good morning, Anton. Yes, I got the question, yeah.
So what is your response to it?
Come again,
The question was, what was a moment from the last few years that really inspired you or made you feel like this work was making a difference in your community?
Yeah, thank you very much, Anton, and the colleagues who asked the questions, participant of this conference. The moment, the time that can I go back to the I got the question, but I can hear the two sounds. Can I go back to the team? I mean to Samba. Okay.
Could you maybe lower your volume a little bit if you hear an echo?
Oh. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Should I read the question once more? So what was a moment from the last few years that really inspired you or made you feel like this work was making a difference in your community?
In 2018, when we went to Panjajar and presented the data, and the communities in Panjajar presented their grievances when we were validating the result, made it more important. Made it more important to me, and I was like, can I go back to Samba, Anton? This Zoom is not good. The Zoom is not good. Can I go back to Samba? Let me
we
go to the
should
program and
ask the help
question.
desk to find a technical solution. Well, maybe to next question. What are the biggest challenges you face in collecting face-to-face research in the field during COVID times, and how are we adapting our methodology? I think I can also respond to that from more of a headquarters point of view. Of course, COVID has provided us with a lot of difficulties in reaching the field. For instance, a lot of travel restrictions, and of course during the lockdown that also was imposed in South Sudan in March and April, there was also an inability to travel within South Sudan. So even our local staff was unable to travel to field locations, and our field office was hibernated for the duration of a couple of months. So that, of course, also stopped our field activities for that duration. I think from last July we found that the situation was more conducive to resume our field operations. And since then we have adapted our training so that it also includes COVID awareness and also very specific indications of how to prevent COVID while doing field work and field data collection. So we're using mouth masks and practice social distancing during training and field data collection. And that proved at least it proved possible to do the field data collection, even though we had to train less people, also because of the regulations in South Sudan of the amount of people that could be trained during one session. So we certainly had impact on it, but since July we have been able to pick up our local activities. Let's see, any examples of how government officials' interference can be circumvented? One of the challenges that was shared. I must say that we're mostly working with local government officials, and their interference is quite limited. Also because we think it's very important to take the local government officials' permission from the early get-go. So whenever we come to an area and we want to train local enumerators and recruit them for training, we always ask permission from local government for these training activities and also for the data collection itself. And that also often triggers the curiosity of local government officials. Because, of course, this is a survey about local security situation, so that is a sensitive topic. And then we also engage with local government when we bring the data back. So we invite them for the local community dialogues, in which they are also have the opportunity to voice their perspective on local security, and also what are their priorities from their point of view. So that often results in, as you could also have seen during the first video, a very good relationship with local authorities. And they even now tend to appreciate the work that we do and the data that we deliver. How can international protection actors such as peacekeeping operations engage better with communities to understand and support their protection priorities? That's a very good question. And that's also something that we need to come up with together with peacekeeping operations while we work together with them. And also together with the communities. I think it would, first of all, it's very important to be informed about what the other is doing, so that we are informed about the field activities of peacekeeping operations. For instance, Civil Affairs Division is doing a lot of work that is quite similar to what NGOs are doing. Not only to prevent duplication, but also to inspire and to know in what areas we are working and how we can help each other with our networks or also with logistical support, because doing field work in South Sudan is also logistically very challenging. And I think it's also important to spend a lot of time with communities, consulting them, asking them for their opinions and their perspectives, not necessarily to get a very clear-cut result out of that, but also just for the sake of it, because communities have a lot of information and perspectives to share, and they're also quite willing to share that. And especially when you also make them part of the solution and help them to prioritize your own intervention in their area, then I think that the results will also be much more sustainable than we see sometimes happening now. And I think that is something that we can do jointly with peacekeeping operations, and we're also always very happy to work alongside with them. What sets you apart from Unmiss, who is also doing community engagement in South Sudan? That's also a very good question. A question that I also would like to see answered by someone from Unmiss, because we both have, of course, different perspectives. But from my own perspective, I think Unmiss is mostly working, I think, from the top down. So they have a lot of good connections at national political level, local political level, and the level of states and governors, and then work their way down. And I think we have a tendency to work our way up. So we work from the community level itself and then try to connect it with the chiefs, for instance, with lower levels of local government, and from there on try to engage the higher levels of government. So I think we can have a very that we have a mode of working that can very well connect, and that's also something that we aspire to do with the contacts with Unmiss that I have. How do local authorities respond when confronted with research findings or community members that are critical of them? How do you keep dialogues productive? Yeah, that's also a very good question, because especially I think in the past, when we sometimes were organizing dialogues before we collected the data underlying these dialogues, we often had dialogues with a lot of authorities in the room, wearing uniforms and being like part of the formal security structure in South Sudan. What we would see normally is that they would be very, they would dominate the discussion somewhat because, of course, of their position and their expertise. And that would make community members quite reluctant to share their views, also because they would see their own views as being less important than those of local government or uniformed participants. And I think the fact that we are now collecting data and using the data as a kind of a starting point for dialogue and discussion, it means that civil society and community members feel more empowered and feel that their personal opinion or their personal perspective is not only their own personal perspective, but is being shared by many more people in their communities, and therefore they feel more secure in voicing their opinions, even though there are formal authorities in the room. And it also gives more credence or credibility to the community views, because they have been surveyed, and therefore they are really considered to be data, and therefore not just personal experiences. And I must say that most local authorities that are participating in our dialogues, they also take the data quite seriously in that regard. I see that John is back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Hey.
Hi.
Hey.
Should we go back to the first question that was directed at John?
Yes.
One moment. Yes. What was a moment from the last few years that really inspired you or made you feel like this work was making a difference in your community?
Yeah, thank you very much, Anton, and thanks to my colleague who asked the questions. My name is John Malith Mabor. I hope you can hear me now.
Yes.
Yeah. The moment that I feel like I was making a difference was when the two communities got reconciled. The time I went to Panjjar with Anton to validate the results of the data collected was a very important moment. And I was there with Anton, and for the first time since 2013, December 2013, there had been no, movement between the Dinkas and the Nuer. But in 2017, I mean, we went with Anton to validate the result in Panjjar. And in that dialogue, in that 3 days dialogue, there were some recommendations made by the community of Panjjar that we have a problem with our neighboring communities at the border, which is actually Eastern Lakes by then. The community challenges that they have mentioned include the raiding from the border, fighting along the border, and it has been their community security concern. They mentioned the border. And of course, in the dialogue, we always give them chance to identify the challenges, the security challenges that are facing them, and also suggest the way forward. So after the dialogue, we asked them what could be the way forward. There are a lot of issues that have been raised, including border security, cattle raiding, and etc., revenge killing. And of course, each community security concern issue is given, a solution. So they said the border security, the only solution for border security is to have a peaceful dialogue with our neighbors from Eastern Lakes. And they have actually mentioned their grievances, and then they send me as a messenger. On the other side, I came to Europe and shared the grievances that have been raised by people of Panjjar, and they did acknowledge. So, and also they raised other issues to people of Panjjar. They said we made this thing that they have mentioned because of this and this. They have been saying that the reason why we ambush people on the River Nile is because they have raided our cattle. So all the issues that have been raised by Panjjar were recognized by people on the other side, but they say they did those things because certain things have been done to them badly. So they were actually on revenge. And therefore, they also suggest that there is a need for the dialogue between the two. So the issue of having dialogue between the two communities came from both sides in order to remain in peace. So until then, when we managed to bring them together, and they have actually signed some declaration that they have to live peacefully and also avoid those kind of things that is causing their lives and their properties, that was the moment I feel that we are actually creating some impacts. This project is not in vain because it is actually asking them what are their security challenges facing them, and then what could be the way forward after the dialogue, including their authorities, and they suggest way forward. And peaceful dialogue was suggested by both Nuer of Panjjar and also the Dinka of Yurul. So after suggesting that they should have peace among themselves, between themselves, we facilitated with our local partners, including AMA, and the human security also participated through me and Anton very greatly, and a peace was signed between the Nuer and the Dinka in 2018. I think before you have seen the photo, the group photo of the chiefs, the one in white khaki are the Dinka, and the one in black are the Nuer chiefs. So they were in Yang in September 2018. So until then, I feel that we are actually doing a great job, and it is not in vain that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the government of the Netherlands had been paying money, and that money had a great impact in South Sudan. So I think that is the only moment that I was so much happy when I see my people reconciled and they live together for the last 5 years of the war. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, John. And also like to drive the point home of like the importance of community engagement. This peace agreement between the Dinka of Lakes and the Nuer of Unity is still adhered to this day. So even though like there are still sometimes communal incidents taking place, but they have been greatly reduced in the last couple of years. So I think that is that's no minor feat. Since we have John around, I think I also want to ask you the next question. Have the pandemic implications appeared as a security threat related to in the results of the survey?
Yes, of course. It is a big issue all over. The pandemic had really affected the communities, and it has contributed in one way or the other to the security situation of the people. like there were so many cases that have risen, especially cases of post marriages. They rise simply because people do not go to jobs, and even those girls are not going to schools, and they think that, I'm sorry to say that, they think that they will be to be impregnated, and some relative who are just after wealth decided to marry them off during this pandemic. In fact, there were a lot of cases of gender-based violence as a security issue during the pandemic, and of course the post-marriages. Some young girls decided not to go to school, and most of them have been impregnated during the pandemic because they are doing nothing. So I think it has contributed. It has contributed to the security situation of the people, especially in South Sudan. People lose their jobs because they didn't go to work, and of course they decided just to marry off their daughters that they think they are already mature. And some people refuse to be married off, and of course it has led to cases of gender-based violence and post marriages. I had 2 cases of post marriages in Rumbek and in Ural as well, and I think it is all over South Sudan.
Yeah. Thank you, John. I will pose another question. How do you think the recently signed peace agreement will impact the everyday safety and security of civilians in South Sudan?
The revitalized peace agreement?
Yes.
You mean?
Yeah, I think that one is meant here.
Yeah, exactly. It's very important. The revitalized peace agreement is really very important. If it is 100% implemented in letter and spirit, of course, the life will go back into normal. It has been going slowly, and people are in dilemma. South Sudanese now feel that like they are in peace. Others feel like they are just somehow in the halfway, not in war, not in peace, because of course there is no much fighting going on, although some other rebel groups are still in the bush. And of course, Salva Kiir and Riek Machar are in Juba, going to their offices every day. Of course, it has just left people in dilemma that is there real peace? And if there is a real peace, why are we not seeing our brothers back from the refugees camp? Of course, the coronavirus has also contributed to this because they have been locked on the other side. But if it is real peace, it has taken so many months now, but state governors are not fully formed. Until we talk up to date, Malakal has no governor because the IO is supposed to suggest the name of one of the generals, but the government is refusing. I mean, Salva Kiir is refusing to appoint him because he the one to endorse the final list from the IO. So security sector reform is still not fully implemented, like the integration of the forces, the organized forces. It has not been done, and people are just sitting. Of course, no more fighting is going on, and then there is no real peace. But generally, we hope that our people have learned from previous fightings. They have also learned how to negotiate their points out, because it has taken a long time now without a government in place, full government in place. Only governors were formed from in the state, but even the governors did not appoint their cabinets. The state executive is not appointed. So I would simply say, of course, we hope for the best. I think there will be no more war in South Sudan, because even the leaders themselves found that confrontation is not helpful. So they will just do those things politically, like delaying to appoint the governor, and they have to negotiate their way out. So I think they are trying to improve. Otherwise, even if it were to be before, that would have even caused another fighting itself for a governor not to be announced and the name was submitted. But I think now they know how to sort out their issues, which is actually good.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, John. There are still some more questions, but with the eye on the time, I think it would be best to finish this session. I would want to thank you all very much for your attention and your participation in this session. I hope it was useful, and also the rest of the day will be useful and very interesting for you. We will go for a 1.5-hour lunch break now. And at 2 p.m. Dutch time, we will resume our program with an expert panel on community engagement during times of uncertainty. So we hope to welcome all of you back at that session. And thank you again for joining us.